Well, hello, and thank you for joining us today. For those of you who are watching this video, my name is Joselyn Spence, and I serve as the director of the Mental Health and Wellness Initiative for the National Benevolent Association of the Christian Church Disciples of Christ. Today, I have Reverend Lee Ivey with me for a special conversation as a follow-up to our July webinar, which was entitled Hope and Healing, Tending to Our Spiritual and Mental Well-Being After Crisis and Trauma. In that July webinar, we had 3 panelists who discussed trauma and shared their pandemic experiences as clergy and therapists, as well as aspects of their personal lives and ways we can focus on caring for ourselves while caring for others. Reverend Lee was a scheduled panelist for the webinar where he planned to also share his insight specific to the Black community, which is highly important as the Black community has been impacted disproportionately by the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as the pandemic of racial violence and other concerns. Unfortunately, he was unable to attend, so we are offering this follow-up conversation to provide his wisdom and expertise through the lens of his context on the topic of tending to our spiritual and mental well-being, crisis, and trauma. So before we start our conversation, I'm going to read his bio. Reverend Lee Ivey is a therapist in residency at the Counseling Center at Christian Theological Seminary and a staff therapist at the Martin Luther King Community Center, both in Indianapolis, Indiana, where he facilitates direct clinical services to individuals, couples, families, and groups. He is an active member of the American Counseling Association, Indiana Counseling Association, and the NBA Mental Health Equity Cohort. Lee is ordained in the Disciples of Christ Christian Church, serving Light of the World Christian Church as the servant leader for the New Members Ministry and Images of Light, my ministry, and as the clergy chair for the Worship Planning Committee. Lee enjoys roller skating and road trips with his family. Welcome, Lee.
Peace. That was a mouthful, Jocelyn. I appreciate
it. Yes, it was. So to get us started, I have read your bio for the people, but please share a little bit more about your context during the pandemic.
Absolutely. You are correct that I had every intention on attending that webinar in July and speaking about trauma and pandemic and Black experience, my experience. And then I got hit with COVID myself. So I was down. I could not attend. And let me tell you, forgiving myself for not being able to attend, that was a difficult piece in and of itself. Then came the email and letting everybody know, hey, y'all, I can't make it. I'm down. So it's important to acknowledge that this pandemic it's affecting everyone. I mean, I know we know that, but normally therapist-client relationship, the client may be experiencing a thing that the therapist does not, or the pastor may be able to preach to folks and maybe they've already been delivered from a situation. You get what I mean? Mm-hmm. But the pandemic, ain't nobody delivered from that, if I can say it that way.
Exactly. We're all in it and it's happening. We're going through it ourselves. And I'm glad that you brought up that point of the self-forgiveness that you gave to yourself and not being able to make the webinar, because I know when we had a previous conversation about that and you mentioned again, I wish I could have been there. And I said, You couldn't, you had to take care of yourself. This is the literal show of what this webinar was about, tending to ourselves in the midst of crisis and trauma. And I think naming that self-forgiveness is key to that, as well as the acknowledgement that this is a real thing that's happening and we're going to have different responses to it. We're going to have different experiences within it. Some people have had COVID, some people have family and friends, people that they're working with, clients, people in their congregations. So what, in the midst of all of that, can you share a little bit about what that experience was like for you to manage your own wellness, your own recovery, and what happened with all of the people that you are called to serve that you could not show up and serve at that time?
Oh my goodness. Absolutely. Um, I would absolutely like to talk about it. Let's do it. I had to reschedule everyone, um, at least while the sickness was high intensity for me. And high intensity looked like being in bed with a migraine, um, low energy, weakness. I couldn't show up and authentically and energetically and in all the ways that my clients needed me to be able to show up. It was hard to show up for myself, so I had to reschedule everyone. Um, and sometimes that looked like, all right, y'all, let's it's Monday. Let's see about meeting on Thursday. Let's see how I feel then. And so then the Thursday at that time comes, and I might feel good that morning. But then we're meeting at 11 and now it's 10:45 and all of a sudden COVID is hitting. And, the intensity has come back. And maybe I'm not able to send a message in those last 15 minutes. It was that intense. It would go like that. Um, I'm saying that to say I even had to ask for forgiveness from my clients and ask them to bear with me. Normally we talk about self-disclosure in the therapy world and even in the clergy world. We don't want to self-disclose too much to our clients, to our congregants. It's just a level of, keeping the frame, the therapeutic frame, the clergy congregant frame, the frame. Otherwise, we get into other territories of dual relationships, friendships, et cetera, et cetera. But I had to let my clients know, y'all, I got COVID, and I'm not able to show up in the ways that I want to, in the best ways that I'd like to. And so it was having those conversations. It was having that understanding. It was asking for grace. It was giving myself forgiveness for not being able to show up in the ways that I normally would like to. And then even, what about the father hat? What about the family hat? What about, the hobbies hat? It was forgiveness in a lot of different ways. So rescheduling things, creating a plan, being ready to ditch the plan. A lot of that happened. It was a lot.
Yeah.
And it's still going. It's still going. I think I might be one of those long-term persons where I don't have COVID per se anymore, but the symptoms still show up randomly. And so it's still that matter of still having those conversations. New clients coming in, still having those conversations. It's a hard piece because we weren't taught this in school, so we're doing a new thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm glad that you also mentioned that we weren't taught this, I didn't go to seminary and have multiple courses on this is how you get through a pandemic. I didn't go and get, to get my counseling degree and talk about this is how you work with clients through a pandemic. We are all going through this together and figuring it out together, even though we do have, documented data and strategies and frameworks to deal with trauma, to deal with disaster. But this is something that's very different, that many people have no idea what they're doing, and being able to acknowledge that as well is key. And I think that's a key phrase that keeps coming up, the acknowledgement of it and the grace in that, because we have to remind the people that we're working with that we are human, and there's no one who is perfect that can do everything but God. So then to be clergy and feel like you have to show up perfectly all the time. I mean, we understand this is a thing where when you are the leader, the helper, you feel like you have to do that. But clergy, therapists, and other community leaders are experiencing a lot of burnout, which I want to go to as well, because I know we've been talking about your COVID experience, which happened recently. Even before that, and going through the several months, over a year of the pandemic, and the multiple pandemics that were happening, especially being a Black man. Did you experience burnout? Did you experience any other trauma symptoms, and how did you take care of yourself in the midst of that?
Wow. How much time do we have? You know? Shoot. Because here's the thing. All of our customs, all of our cultural ways of being, all of our patterns of behavior, all of our normalities, everything was challenged. How we think about ourselves has been challenged with this pandemic. And so acknowledging that we can't do all the things the way that we are used to doing all the things. That might be one of the critical issues of this pandemic. Just acknowledging that and being okay with that, making it okay to not be a superstar, because we're so used to being that way. I mean, I make sure every strand of hair is in the right place before I walk in. You know what I mean? We just can't be perfect. We can't be, we can't, we're unable to. I hate to use the word can't, but we have been disabled from being that superstar that we were used to being. Many of our children, weren't able to go to school during, we were doing homeschool. We were all of a sudden working from home. So now we're spending all this time with each other, with our families, more time than we've ever spent before. And just acknowledging like, hey, I might get tired of you, wife. And I might get tired of you, husband. And, I don't have that break that work would offer me from you. It's, I love you. Don't mean I don't love you, but maybe I don't like you. So, and the same thing happened with our children. And then I'm just saying, we've all had to get used to doing things a different way. Church life, oh my goodness. We're unable to hug and love on each other in the ways that we're so used to doing. So what does it look like to do church online? We're still trying to discover new ways to do worship. What does it mean to worship God from home now? For many people, Sunday was their day.
Yeah.
To go and worship with folks. And so what does it mean to do that from home now? Is it still authentic? Do you still catch the spirit? When you catch the spirit, do you take a lap around your house? These are things to think about. We would do that in the church house. What about at home? And so it's creating a new relationship with God.
Yeah.
In addition to a new relationship with ourselves. So for me, it's been much of that kind of discernment, trying to reimagine, allow God to be new in my life, allowing God to be new and fresh in my family, and creating space for that. Because what could happen is I could be expecting myself to do the things I could, that could be my standard. Pre-COVID could be my standard. And every day I'm trying to get back to that place instead of allowing a new thing to manifest. It's a different kind of work.
Yeah, that's good. Allowing a new thing to happen. We have to be flexible during the pandemic. And I think that's one of the concerns, one of the challenges that people are having the most is, okay, we're going through this thing. I'm finding a new normal. I'm feeling a little bit more stable now. And then, oh no, they've changed up the rules, right? Which really happened a lot at the start of the pandemic, where we thought, oh, it'll just be 2 weeks. We're going to be on quarantine, a stay at home, whatever your state called it. And then it was, oh no, it's being extended. And then, oh no, it's being extended. Oh no, it's being extended. And now here we are. And then it's, okay, you're vaccinated. Okay, we can take our mask off. Oh no, we have a new variant. We have multiple variants. And the constant turning over where there's no stability, because when we think about people going through trauma, typically it's this event that happens. And then you have that period of time to lament, to grieve, to heal, to do what you need to do to then move through it and create that new life, right? That's beyond whatever the trauma was. When we're in a situation now where we don't necessarily have that same layout before us. So we're constantly having to do something new. And I'm glad that you mentioned that. For the people who are watching this, to remember that one of the ways of tending to yourself is being flexible in this and allowing something new, as we allow God to do something new. That is what we profess, right? We can't just profess it on Sunday or in our time of devotion, but we have to see it throughout our day. I have often told people, as you're navigating this time, and check in with yourself every week, check in with yourself every month. What's working for me as far as my schedule, as far as the ways that I'm relating to people, as far as what it is that I need? Do you stop and ask yourself? I'll ask you now. Do you stop and ask yourself, what do you need today? I don't always do it. I'm going to be honest with the people. I don't always do it. But on the days that I do, I try to make sure that I give myself what I need, because we're going through something that's unprecedented.
Come on. And thank you for that, because I'm definitely not professing to have it together in this time, because it's a constant change that happens within ourselves, within society, within our cultures. Absolute change. And so I do forget. And then I come back one day and I'm like, hey, Lee, oh my goodness, what is going on? Let me check in. Let me pause for a minute and just look at what I've been doing today. Look at what I've been doing this week. How am I feeling right now? Oftentimes I feel overwhelmed. And so, because I still have that voice in there of get back to this level of perfection, do things to this level of execution. And that's not always accessible in this time. It's far less accessible than it used to be. Yeah. So that's a constant conversation. Come on. I felt something. Come on with that. Yes. Yes.
I think it's not accessible. That piece, I think, too, to just say very plainly to those who are watching, as you've been going back to, you cannot go back to your pre-COVID standard, cannot be the standard that you're attempting to get to, because we're still going through the experience. I think naming very clearly for people that when you're going through a traumatic experience, your brain and your body do not have the capacity to act as if they would, as when something traumatic or fear or any of those things are not happening. Your body is eliciting a stress response. You can't overcome that. What I like to say to myself in those moments, because I am also a trauma survivor, before the pandemic, what I like to say in those moments, if my body is eliciting a stress response, thank you for trying to protect me. All right, because that's all our brain and our body is doing, is trying to protect us. Thank you for trying to protect me. It's okay. I am safe right now. And so you figure out what those things are that you can do in those moments to soothe yourself, but also having to acknowledge and accept that you can't do what you used to do. And that is not a failure on you, but it is literally the impact of what we are going through right now. And I felt the need to say that very plainly, because I think people overlook that, and they're still striving to be something that you biologically, physically, all of those things you cannot be it right now. It's okay. Let me just give you all permission. It's okay. We don't have full access to our capabilities when we are going through traumatic experiences. We don't.
We don't. We don't. And you know, I want to share my appreciation with you. You spoke the F word. Oh my goodness, failure. Um, I wonder how many people are living in failure daily because of the toxic expectation of our pre-COVID standard, living into that standard, but never being able to achieve it. Like how present is the feeling of failure? And so that's why that piece of forgiveness is ultra important. And that's one of the hardest things to do in this season. Forgive ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah.
So may I ask you a question?
Sure.
So because trauma, we, like you said at the start of this, we thought this might be an acute trauma. It's going to be in and out. We'll be done with it soon. But it's been very complex, and it's been very much so chronic. This kind of trauma. So I would wonder about how, like, what does even healing in a season like this, you know, how accessible is healing? I don't know if I'm asking you, but I'm just, you know, that's a question I try to answer. You know?
Yeah. How accessible is healing when it's long term, chronic, compounded, you know, even as we started off mentioning the experiences of the Black community during this time, the racial injustice that was put on just a huge stage. I mean, we knew that many of those things were always happening, but put on a huge stage. And then, you know, we had summer of 2020 where there was all of this talk and all of the allies, and then summer 2021, it's like not necessarily the same thing. We see the struggles of Black athletes who are putting their mental health first, and people downing them who were the same people last year lifting up the Black community and their mental health and their needs. And so accessing healing in the midst of all of that, I think for the Black community, I think that's something that has been innate in the way that we come together communally. I am very big on communal ethics of care. We have to come together. We cannot heal in isolation. And so being able to connect with one another and create structure around what it is that we need. I think actually healing through going to therapy. Please go to therapy. Anybody who is watching, if you have never been to therapy before, please, you know, go to therapy. Please have someone who's able to offer you that level of care, who knows what they are doing. And, you know, as two therapists being on this call who can also speak to the challenges that we have faced during the pandemic while still being able to show up for people, also know that your therapist, they are doing their own work too, right? And taking care of themselves. So you need people who are educated and able to provide that level of care to you and accessing the healing that is available to you in this process. Again, I take it back to the start of acknowledging how you're feeling and normalizing your trauma response, you know, knowing that you're human, you're not in control, and you do need help, and you tell other people. This is taking me back to a thought that I was having about the webinar. It's called Tending to Your Spiritual and Mental Well-Being. And when I think about the word tending, I think about the word tender and being gentle. And so we have to be gentle with ourselves. We have to slow down, right? Everybody talked at the start of the pandemic, oh, it gave us an opportunity to slow down. And now things are revving back up, and we don't know if it's going to be another shutdown, but you can create that for yourself. You say, I need to slow down. I need to focus on my healing. That might look like you having to reach out to one of your colleagues to say, I can't preach. Can you step
Seriously,
up? uh,
please.
Send me, and hopefully you create a community around you where one of the other pastors can say, don't worry about it, I got it. Or maybe one of your colleagues that you went to seminary with says, hey, I'm gonna record something tonight and I'll send it to you. Y'all stream it on Sunday. That sort of community that we create with each other is also where we access our healing in this ongoing process.
And if I may, uh, I wonder about the churches where, you know, 5 to 10% of the people do 100% of the work, or
Yeah.
a very large portion of the work. This is also an opportunity to invite others to the table, to invite, as we talk about, think about community. This is an opportunity to get more people involved, and to release self of the pressure of doing all the things.
Right.
Especially if you're a long-term COVID person, like where it comes in out of nowhere and all of a sudden low energy, headache, all of those things. What if that happens right before it's time to preach?
Yeah.
Who can step up to the table? Oh my goodness. And what if, God forbid, on that Sunday, there is no sermon? What,
Right.
what happens? What is God? Who is God without a sermon on that Sunday?
Ooh,
I'm sorry. This is like
ready to
saying
preach.
cuss words. This is like,
Yeah.
It's being flexible, like you said, being flexible with self, being flexible with the way things were, have been, and that we're learning to be. So, so I appreciate you naming that. Thank you for indulging me in, to name that question, because everyone is going through this thing together. I would invite everyone to also see a therapist, get you a therapist, try some new things. We again, pre-COVID self, functioned a certain way. This pandemic is literally forcing us to do new things. So let's try something new. Maybe we meditate, sit down and try to clear your mind for 5 minutes. Maybe try bike riding, cycling. Maybe, we go for a walk as a family, and maybe we make that a every other day thing, once a week thing. Try some new things though. Is the calling. I hear God saying, try something new every day.
Yeah. Yeah. Try something new. Which it takes me to this other thought as well that I wanted to make sure that I asked you about too. And you kind of touched on it a little bit in your bio of some of the things that you enjoy doing with your family. But I also want to name that, when we're accessing our healing in this process, we're tending to our mental and spiritual and emotional well-being. We want to create safe spaces for ourselves. We want to, so just as I mentioned a moment ago, would you be able to reach out to someone else to be able to provide a sermon for your congregation moments before? You said like the 15 minutes before you about to step up and do it, or whether it's that week, or whether you just kind of foresee, I feel myself getting to a place of burnout. I feel myself getting to a place of I'm feeling some of these trauma symptoms coming up. I'm not sure what to do. Don't push through them. Pause and get what, and ask for what you need in those moments. But I think creating that safe space to connect with other clergy, to connect with other therapists. One of the things that was very helpful to me during the start of the pandemic, it was April. One of the sisters that I know created a support group for women of color therapists. And it was such a balm to meet with these women every other week for 90 minutes on Zoom and just talk about the things that we couldn't necessarily tell other people. I think, you might not have something structured like that, but let me also mention that in my tenure as director here, I do aim that we will have a lot more structured experiences like that to address the mental health of our clergy. So that will be coming. But that might look like you reaching out to a couple of people and saying, hey, can you meet on Zoom at 7:00 on Thursday for an hour? And all of you get on there and you get to share how you're feeling. You know what? I have done enough funerals this year. I don't want to do it anymore. You know what? I don't feel God right now. How am I going to preach? You know what? I don't want to talk to these clients because
seriously,
so-and-so in my community just died and I don't have it in me, and being able to say that with other people who can identify with how that feels and say, I feel the same way too. And you all just get to share that. And you don't necessarily have to have a solution, right?
yeah.
Because we follow a biblical text that gives us plenty of examples of
Come
being
on.
able to lament together as a community without
Yes.
having to answer right away. So I think there's that safe space that we have to create. But then there's also this safe space we need to create for life-giving experiences and creating some structure in our day where, because creating that type of structure is what's going to give us some control and it's in this unpredictable situation. That looks like, I know at 5:00, I'm going for a bike ride. I don't care what's going on. And I'm
Come
going to enjoy
on.
myself,
Yes.
Yesterday, I went for a walk with one of my elderly neighbors. She reached out to me and said, hey, could we walk together? I see you sometimes walking. We put on our mask and we went out there and we got to walk together. That's created structure in my day that was life-giving. Reducing the intake of news, reducing the intake of triggering information, and inserting the life-giving things. So after saying all of that, I want to know from you, what are some of the life-giving things that you've inserted into your, daily experience? Because that's also a part of the healing process. We have to wake up that space of joy and life within ourselves in order to keep going forward.
Yeah. Be honest with you, it was very difficult. It has been. It was difficult to access joy. Maybe in those, after at the start of the pandemic, it was like, all right, y'all, let's push through this thing. Let's make it happen. And at some point, that endurance was challenged. And it was like, man, I've been trying to push this thing at 100%, 100 miles an hour, and it wasn't. Burnout kicked in. So that's when it got a little dark. Joy was hard to access. And so and I didn't even realize it at first. I was just going with emotions. At some point, I looked up and I said, life has to look different than this. It has to. Cannot continue to function in this way. And that, it was impacting my family. It was impacting my work. How do you have joy for your or hope for your client? And it's hard to access for yourself. What kind of joy is that? What kind of hope is that? And so I had to start going out and getting some sun. I had to get out of the house. This idea of being isolated was intense. The messages were stay home. If maybe you have COVID, but your family doesn't, so you go into that room over there and they're going to bring you food and you're going to just stay in that room because you're going to protect your family that way. Right. And maybe they're right. And maybe you also need to go outside and get some sunlight. And roll around in some grass. And maybe you need to take a bike ride. And just, you can be by yourself and not get anyone sick and just take a bike ride, There, we have to be creative. And so that's one thing that kicked in for me. I said, life has to look different than this. So we started playing board games. We started, Monopoly is my game. Do not, if you try, just know I'm great at that thing. Okay. um, we would we would take a car ride sometime. We just go out for a drive and just people watch. Go to places where there are people, just people watch it and talk and laugh. And so then we would feel like we're in community without actually interacting physically, and shaking hands with people. That was a way, that was like a loophole I felt. And so there's a lot of ways. And so then my relationship with God was impacted because now I'm seeing how God blesses the bees and the flowers.
Yes.
And I'm seeing how, and with that bike ride, I'm acknowledging how God shows up in the cracks of the street. Oh my goodness. It's just
Yes.
who God is and how God shows up has been impacted, has been enlightened for me. And I think that is accessible to everyone in this time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, that's so good. You get to see what God is in these new ways, especially in nature and creation. I feel the same way. I've had the same experience in the new ways that I've had to engage community, the new ways that I've been out in nature and being with myself and being with God. So I think that's really good. I'm also glad that you talked about that process of pushing through and then things getting dark and then recognizing, oh no, we need to shift something. Because I want people to realize, I want that to be normalized for people, that that's just kind of that's a cycle that we will go through in life. We know that, we know that sometimes we'll be presented with a challenge. We'll decide to push through. We won't have enough steam, not because we're failures, but because we're human and we cannot withstand. Our bodies are powerful and they can do a lot of things. They're working constantly to keep us alive, but also there's a certain limit for all of us that we cannot push past. And that's okay. You need to rest and take care of yourself so that you don't get to that limit and, something else happens to you. And we know that stress impacts our bodies in so many ways. We get sick, we, high blood pressure, heart attack, stroke, these other sorts of things that happen to us, or blowing up, becoming emotionally volatile with people or withdrawing. And we don't want people to have to constantly experience those things. When you notice yourself, again, having any of these symptoms, having any of these experiences, pausing to check in with yourself and get the help and the support that you need is what is most important, while also normalizing the fact that you're going to have those experiences. It's going to be dark sometimes. It just is. One of my favorite scriptures in the Psalms, I don't remember exactly where it is, but one of my favorites talks about how the darkness is light to God. So then it's like, okay, whatever, I'm in the dark. God is there too, and doesn't even feel like it's too dark. There's nothing too dark. So,
but God is in the darkness. God is in that darkness.
Yeah.
We sometimes think that, God is supposed to be this pure thing, and but God is in the mess, and this is messy.
Yeah.
And God is here with us, and it's hard to remember that sometimes. And so a part of this healing process is finding someone that you can name that with, and then not someone that is going to say, it's okay, we're good, we're fine. I think we can always, I think that kind of friend is accessible, but someone who's going to say, yeah, girl, this sucks. Like, brother, man, look, we tripping. You right. This situation is not okay. And we'll navigate that and name that and honor that
Yeah.
with you. I think
Yeah.
that's important. And
Yeah.
I think the therapist can absolutely do that for us.
Mm-hmm.
I think the clergy can access that kind of person too, because sometimes we feel like we got to be on point for our congregants. My hope is that even the clergy member can find someone that they can name those hard things with.
Right.
This sucks, and I don't feel like preaching. I don't. It's hard for me to access what God is trying to say in this season. To be able to say that, I think there's
Mm-hmm.
just so much healing power in even speaking those words, because it's okay. It's okay for that to be where we are in this season.
Mm-hmm.
So, wow.
Yeah. It's okay to not be okay. I think that's one of the main, takeaways from this conversation for people. It's okay. You are where you are. Acknowledge it so that you can then figure out how you need to move forward, being flexible in that. And bringing some elements of joy into your experience. That's how we're going to tend to our spirit, because again, that's what we're talking about, tending to ourselves. Bring the elements of joy in. Give yourself opportunities to tend to your spiritual self through seeing, well, where is God in the midst of all of this? It's not the way that I think it is. So God is here somewhere. So where are you? And looking for that. I think documenting that as well, for people, if you journal, if you do vlogs, blogging, whatever sort of thing, writing some things down about your experience as well. If you're not able to talk to someone directly immediately, you can write those things down. And as we talk about writing too, I also want to mention earlier when I mentioned creating structure, being able to write down a plan for yourself as well. Write down a little brief wellness plan. It doesn't have to be extravagant. It could be 5 bullet points. When I start to feel these burnout symptoms, when I start to feel these trauma symptoms, okay, when I start to feel like I need to pull away, I want to isolate, I'm having a lot more anxiety, I'm very fatigued, I have low tolerance, I'm irritable, I'm hypervigilant, I'm afraid to be around people and places in a way that I haven't been before. Here's what I need to do, okay? And you can put on those bullet points some of the things that we talked about today. So doing that and writing it down, because again, as we said earlier, most people say, oh, I know what to do. Well, what did we say earlier about what happens to our brain and our body when we're in the midst of a traumatic experience? We don't have the capacity to access some of those thoughts. There's literally your brain shuts down. Your prefrontal cortex it's not going to work. And
No,
you can't push past it just because you feel like you want to. You have
absolutely.
to surrender to the experience. And that's where the healing comes in. We already know that, right? When we surrender. So I say that. And I also, want to offer a couple of other things. You talked about games, board games and bike riding. I say to everyone who's watching, please insert things like that into your life. Doing breath work, just pausing to take some deep breaths in and out, which will do wonders to all aspects of your holistic health. Movement, dancing. I love to have dance parties by
Come
myself.
on.
Dance
Yes.
parties, exercise, walking. We talked about walking, running, bike riding, yoga, stretching your body, moving.
Yeah.
As well as, you can do very simple things like holding yourself and rocking, which has an impact internally in your body, on your system, because again, when we're talking about trauma, you also want to bring in the somatic aspect. So not
Come
just
on.
talking about things, but bringing the body into it. And then engaging some other things of self-soothing through the 5 senses and relaxing your body, progressive muscle relaxation, which you can just do easily by squeezing your palms and slowly releasing. So there's
Seriously.
a lot of different, tools and techniques and things that are here for us as we go throughout this process of tending to our spiritual and emotional and mental wellness, it's available for you. Yeah.
I would add, coloring.
Yes.
I would add drawing. What I would ask us to, I would encourage that we ask the question, what did our 10, 11, 12-year-old self
Yes.
enjoy doing? Maybe even our 6, 7, 8-year-old self, but then, our childhood self, what did we enjoy doing as a child? And even trying that out as an adult,
Mhm.
what would that be like? I'll tell you, for me, accessing another part of enjoyment that I haven't felt in a very long time. It was beautiful. And I would invite everyone into those kinds of moments. Pull out some Legos, start building some stuff, like
Yes.
these things that we have gotten away from that are so important, especially for a moment like this. Thank you for naming that. That was
Yes.
necessary. Mhm.
Yes. Thank you. So I will ask if there is anything else that you want to offer before we close up our conversation. We could talk about these things for a very long time.
I'm trying not to. It's hard to not like just go with it, but I'm understanding, we have a time limit that we got to stay within. People might stop listening. But I think I would, I can't stress enough to make space for God to be new.
Mm.
Make space for things to be fresh again. We put our clothes, our dirty clothes, in the laundry. We put it in the washer, and we put our fragrances in there, and then uh, you know they become clean again. They become fresh again. I think this is a calling for us to become fresh again, and we have to be able to access those, access that kind of a freshness within ourselves. I am not the person to write down those 5 bullet points like you are. But I am the type of person that can acknowledge my darkness when I'm in there and then go find some sunlight.
Yeah.
And I want us to go find some sunlight.
Mm.
It's okay to be in that dark place,
Right.
as you need to be. Be there. That's important for the process. And acknowledge that you're there.
Mm-hmm.
And then at some point, when you're ready, go get that sunlight.
Yeah. Oh, that's such a good point to end our conversation on: tending to your mental, your spiritual well-being, acknowledge the darkness, and let the sun in. And as we've talked about, there's so many ways to be able to do that. I hope that, those of you who have watched this may have jotted down some notes, or you'll go back through and jot down some notes, because we touched on a number of different things. And so, yes, very helpful. So thank you, Lee, for your wisdom today. Thank you for those who are watching us. We truly hope that our conversation provided you with something useful as you navigate these unprecedented times, and as you take care of yourself, as you take care of others. For additional resources and support, we invite you to visit our website, nbacares.org, for more educational and worship resources, as well as our soul care wellness activities. You might also visit our denominational website, disciples.org, for clergy resources for crisis and trauma. I'm grateful to be serving you in this role as the director, and I assure you that we will have more opportunities like this, more resources disseminated to you as we navigate this pandemic, because this is a very challenging time, and we're going to do all that we can to make sure that everyone has what they need and we're able to get through this together. So one of the other ways that you can be involved and stay informed of our work is to sign up for our newsletter at nbacares.org/newsletter. You can check off the box that lets us know you're interested in mental health and wellness, and you'll get emails from us and stay updated on anything that we have coming forward. So thank you again, Lee, for being here. I appreciate you so much and look forward to the continued work that we will do to help the people. Mm-hmm. And until next time, to everyone, grace and peace be with you.
Thank you again, Joselyn. Much peace.